Hey everyone, I've been chewing on this idea that I'm not sure I totally agree with or not, but there's this thing that where almost overnight it feels like the real threat to WordPress is no longer things like Wix and Squarespace. We've been talking about Wix and Squarespace as the big competitors to WordPress for so long, but overnight it's like it's not them anymore. It's Lovable and it's Bolt. So today on our 100th episode of WP Product Talk, we're going to talk all about how AI is going to save the future of WordPress. This is WP Product Talk, a place where every week we bring you insights in product marketing, business management and growth, customer experience, product development, and more. It's your go-to podcast for WordPress product owners by WordPress product owners. And now, enjoy the show. Hey everyone, I'm Matt Cromwell, co-founder of GiveWP and Senior Director of Customer Experience at Stellar WP.
And I'm Amber Hinds, CEO of Equalize Digital.
And today we're talking all about an important topic that most WordPress product owners don't know yet about, which is the future of WordPress with AI specifically.
Yep. And that is why we invited two awesome and amazing guests to join us here today, James LePage and Jason Adams. So welcome both of you. Would you want to introduce yourselves for everyone who is watching?
Sure. Hello, I'm James LePage. I am the CoreAI co-lead, and I am also the AI lead at Automatic.
Awesome, James. Thanks for being here. Jason, what about you?
I'm Jason Adams. I'm a director of engineering over at Stellar WP. I'm also one of the folks that originally worked with Matt back in the day at GiveWP before we were acquired, and have recently been jumping in with the WordPress AI team and excited about what they're doing over there and all the possibilities it brings to WordPress.
Awesome. So glad to have you both here. I think it's going to be a great conversation, and I'm super excited, Amber. I can't even believe it is our 100th episode.
Yay!
It's one of those things where you just start and you never expect. Like I think I even have like code in the website where it like all the episode numbers start with a 0. Like just never expecting.
Planning ahead.
Yeah, I was never going to get to like a 3-digit number. Oh my gosh, it's ridiculous. So one thing I decided was like today I'm just gonna have some fun and give some free stuff away. So if you are here and you're watching us on YouTube, you should say hi and tell us where you're from and contribute to the conversation as best you can, because I'm going to give away from my own pocket some things, a hat, basically, exclusive custom WP Product Talk hat. So if you are a fan of WP Product Talk and would love to have a hat like this, comment on YouTube. Tell us what you think about AI. Tell us all the ways that you think James is steering WordPress astray and doing it wrong. All the ways that Give is awesome. That would be great for Jason. I'll see at the very end of the show. I'm going to pick a winner, or maybe, I don't know, 20 winners. We'll see what happens. See how I feel.
They are pretty fabulous hats. I will say I got one from you, and my partner Chris stole it from me. So yeah, probably I need to get another one.
So I probably should give one to James and Jason while I'm at it. I mean, since
I
you're
feel
all
like
here.
it's going to be one of these
Right?
that become collectibles. So I definitely want one. Yes.
There you go. There you go.
Ian asked, yeah, do you know how big's the hat, Matt?
We'll work it out, Ian. Like one way or another, you tell me you need like an extra large for the big brain, then we'll make it work. So we'll figure it out one way or another. A little off the cuff, I have to say. I don't have like a whole process involved here. We'll see how it goes. But
super fun to be here and celebrating our 100th episode. So thank you, James and Jason, for joining us for that, and everyone watching.
Thank you for having me, by the way. 100 is a crazy milestone. So yeah. I'm honored to be here on the 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know till yesterday was the 100th. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Thanks for
Yeah,
having us. It was like an honor to be here for this milestone.
yeah. I mean, I did ask you both to wear tux, but whatever. So
The rental didn't
Hey,
come
I
through.
brought my WP Product Talk t-shirt to the episode, so.
yeah, yeah, that was perfect. Better than me. I didn't think about it. I also have the hat, so I could have wore the hat. So, alrighty. So let's set the stage. Right now, we're talking about AI as a future of WordPress. I set it up. Lovable and Bolt, they are building WordPress sites by just typing a couple sentences. Um, and we want to talk about that kind of thing. The rise of the CoreAI team has been really influential and important. And James, we're happy that you're here and that is a big effort that Automatic and WordPress Core is working on right now. Also at Stellar, Jason is here from Stellar because Stellar's paying attention and we see it as super significant as well. And we think that there's a big future for how plugins can leverage AI in different ways, but even more so how plugins can leverage what WordPress core is doing with AI. So that's kind of the context. There's several really good interviews with James has been on the circuit, asking questions and answering things and saying his perspective lots of places. Honestly, really good context for this show is if you go to Within WordPress by Remkes de Vries, listen to James's interview over there. That actually really lays the groundwork really, really well for what the core AI team is doing, what James is doing over there, at least in my perspective. I don't know, James, was that a good interview? Did Remkes do okay? Was that a good one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Remkes definitely did okay. And you mentioned that I'm on the circuit, and I'm glad you highlighted that because this is super important to me and CoreAI in that it's not just 4 people sitting in a Slack room making decisions. Instead, it's kind of getting what we think we should do out and having the discourse publicly, seeing what actually makes sense for WordPress. And it looks like we're going in a good direction and there's a lot of feedback, but this is why we want to be doing these things. And Remkes definitely was a lovely interviewer, and I think that's a really good presentation, even from weeks ago, which in AI land, weeks ago is like 40 years ago. So
Totally.
it's still accurate.
Yeah.
It's like dog years. Yeah. Well, I appreciate that you're sharing all that. And of course, thanks, Matt, for setting the scene for everyone. For everyone who's watching, of course, we're not going to spend a bunch of time rehashing, where we've been. What we want to focus on today is where we're going from here today. And so, James, can you just give us some idea of what you're talking about in the core AI team and what things might be coming up?
Yeah. I think the best way to frame what CoreAI is doing is first off offering a surface for everybody to think about AI. And this was a big thing when I was building a startup. And the reason I'm at Automatic now is because I built a WordPress AI startup. A lot of people used us, a lot of people loved us, and we got bought by Automatic, which is how I ended up in my role there as the AI lead. And when I was building this, I was kind of working with other people, and we were all like, hey, there's no, like, where do we talk about AI with the context of core? And like, how do we think that there's like some APIs and some approaches and some core modifications that could really make our lives of building AI and bringing AI to the community and the ecosystem a bit easier. And that didn't exist. So Core AI first is that surface now where we can all come together as product creators and WordPress users and everybody in between and say, this is where we surface these thoughts and these ideas and kind of have the place to do these discussions. So that's the first bit. The second bit is the Core AI team is also delivering actual features and functionality to be explored for WordPress core or WordPress core adjacent things. And a good way to frame what we're doing is in the context of building blocks. So we have several initiatives that all work together as these foundational building blocks that you can use individually to help create AI for WordPress and infuse AI into WordPress core and WordPress plugins and products and themes, also making WordPress more relevant and accessible in the context of all AI. How do we connect WordPress to things like N8N or Claude or Cursor, things like that? So you can use these building blocks to do that. you can also assemble all these building blocks together and create really end-to-end solutions for AI plus WordPress. So the building blocks approach is what we've decided to take. These building blocks are squarely aimed at developers to start, to allow folks who are building the products, building the plugins, either brand new plugins or existing plugins, to use these things and see what works and what doesn't, and where we should steer some of these technical projects. And eventually these building blocks will enable core WordPress, should it make sense, to build AI features into the CMS as well. And it gets us kind of to that point, to that conversation of, oh yeah, like it would be lovely to do auto alt text for images, but how are we going to do that if these things don't exist? So building blocks is the approach. Developer enablement is the first step, which flows into a lot more. The three primary building blocks is a PHP client AI API, an abilities API, and an MCP exploration. And I'll go and give like a really quick background, and then we could get a bit more detailed if we want. The PHP client API allows developers to speak with LLMs coming from OpenAI, Anthropic, Cohere, self-hosted, in browser, through a unified interface. And this is something that you can go and use and give your customers one single place to add an API key for any one of these, and kind of like implement AI in a unified standard way throughout the WordPress ecosystem. The second bit is the abilities API. Abilities API is kind of a new name for the features API. If you've been following AI and WordPress, you probably saw some of the explorations that we did in Automatic with the features API. This is something where you can expose WordPress functionality in a unified LLM friendly way and say, you can do this, you can read this. And from all of that, it goes and plugs back into your first building block to connect. And then the final bit is MCP. And MCP is, how do we expose some of this functionality and data that WordPress has externally to the rest of the ecosystem of AI out there. So those are the three blocks. I think I covered why we're here, what we're doing, where we're going, and we can get more detailed on any of it.
Yeah, I actually do have a question because, I think this is really interesting. The idea of, let's build one way for someone to add an API key and connect to, let's say, OpenAI, and then all the plugins could use it, or all the themes could use it, or whatever. So it's consistent. But I do see a potential challenge here in that I don't know if every plugin developer wants to allow their customers to use their own API key, because a lot of the AI plugins that I've seen out there so far are actually selling credits, and that is how they generate revenue. And so I am curious. I do want to shift to Jason in a minute and hear like how Stellar is looking at this. But James, has this been discussed internally that this might actually be something that product developers don't want?
Yes, it has. And actually, Jason's been a part of some of those discussions, thinking about how hosts could use this work. So I think a very important point to underscore is that our entire mentality, and specific to this way you interact with LLMs, this is being led by Felix Arntz. Felix worked on the performance team in the past. Lovely, incredible, brilliant mind who's working on this. And our thought with all of this, but I think it's most visible in this project, and there's a GitHub repository. I believe it's github.com/WordPress/PHP client AI or API. I don't know, but there's a repository where some of these discussions are happening. And
Okay.
the whole approach here is do the bare minimum, do something that's really simple and allow it to be extended into the ways that make sense for users. So if you are a host, you can go and register your own provider that proxies through your own AI services, and kind of modify this underlying system of allowing your plugins or your developers installing plugins onto WordPress to interact with AI through this unified means. But you can kind of mix and match and figure out how you want to assemble this underlying system to do what you need it to do. And I think that's the core mentality. Like WordPress core is this framework, this simple thing that can be further extended through plugins or code or themes or whatever that is. So we don't want to do everything. We also want to do something that is relevant and helpful for users. And these discussions, like you just mentioned, I believe there's actually a ticket specifically for this, are happening in GitHub. And it goes back to what I'm saying about actually speaking with people and talking with the community. What do we want? What makes sense for WordPress core? What should we ensure is able to be extended to fit some niche use cases that are important to think about? So high level answer, not direct, simply because it's being discussed right now and we're figuring it out.
Yeah, in my mind, I kind of liken it to like take email, for example, right? Like WordPress has a built-in function for delivering email, but email is actually an external dependency. Something has to actually send the mail for you. And so a lot of hosts have kind of a bare minimum thing where it'll work, but then they'll still recommend that you go to like SendGrid or get some other external service, that sort of a thing. And so technically, like philosophically, this concept of like WordPress relies on something external to itself in order to fully fulfill itself it already exists. And so this would be another introduction of like, for the AI to work, we have to have some AI somewhere. And so then different hosts and different plugins and such, I think we'll get creative with how do we want that? Because some people are going to want to use their own tokens because they're going to want to save money or do something like that. Other people aren't going to want to think about it at all. And so I think so long as we make it flexible enough for different creatives to approach this problem differently, I think that will help alleviate that as a pain point.
Yeah. How have you been doing it or thinking about this internally at Stellar and the direction that you can take this with your products?
I mean, as we all know, this is like months old. So, discussions are
and changing every week.
Yeah, exactly. So discussions are happening constantly. We recently launched Stellar sites. Like, obviously, there'd be a huge interest in having this be a part of that, where somebody gets a Stellar site and it automatically has agentic capabilities and has the AI credits built into it. And so, so that's one big direction would be for folks to think of it as something within WordPress. And James and I have talked about this recently of just like, I am very much of the opinion that this can't be seen as just a feature that certain plugins or others can take advantage of inside of WordPress. Like, we need the market to associate this as a feature of WordPress itself. So when somebody thinks, I want a WordPress site, they automatically have it in their mind, this agentic capabilities that it provides.
Yeah. You're saying basically, like, if AI was 100% only plugin territory, that would be a disservice to WordPress.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it can't just be like, oh, GiveWP now has agentic capabilities. Like, okay, good for GiveWP, but the size of the WordPress market isn't going to care. We need way more people to care about this and associate this as something that's really capable in WordPress.
And I have 25 plugins, and I have to enter my OpenAI API key in 25 different places, and that sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. So at Stellar, we're definitely buying into that vision. It's not just strictly how can we as Stellar take advantage of it in our hosting and products, but like, we see this as a need in the greater WordPress market and industry. And so that's like step one is believing in that vision, and then bringing it down to, yes, we want it to be a part of Stellar sites. And yes, like I've talked about, it'd be super cool if somebody could go into their GiveWP dashboard and ask questions like, who are my top 10 donors last year who were also subscribers? Be able to ask insightful questions of the AI in order to get those sorts of insights back from your data that otherwise can be really hard to do. We make these big reporting tools because we're trying to give people enough information without overwhelming them in order to get the kind of insights that they're looking for. And
one little detail there, Jason, the the donors who are also subscribers. For folks who don't know, Give doesn't have a subscriber functionality in one way or another. So like if they're these top donors who are also subscribers, they're subscribers of something else that's not GiveWP. And the only way for the AI to know that is if it has access to all that data all at the same time. So
yeah,
just want to
Yeah,
spread
exactly.
that out a little bit.
Yeah, and I
I
also
mean, it gets
think
interesting though, as a product developer, I'd say like a lot of our data is not actually stored in our WordPress site. I mean, a lot of it comes through the WordPress site, right? But then we also have our CRM, which for us happens to be ActiveCampaign, but lots of people use different ones. And then there's also things happening there. So like thinking about the future of this, like how do you get the best data for a product developer and giving AI access to it? It's almost like, I don't know, is WordPress the right place for all of this to be stored? Or does the WordPress AI also need to have some sort of capability to connect it to external platforms that might also have additional data, right? Like this is where I think it gets super complex on that kind of front.
I think it doesn't need to be as black and white as that, in that if we create these 3 building blocks, one of them is MCP. And MCP is a protocol that allows software to talk to AI. Usually software not directly associated with that AI. So to answer your question about, hey, I have data sources externally and maybe I want to mix and match them and include some of WordPress's data there, you can address that through the MCP approach. If you want to build inside WordPress, you can address that through the Abilities API approach. If you want to use LLMs within WordPress, you can use the PHP Client API. Or you can choose to use one piece of it and only expose data externally, or only pull data back into WordPress and build agents within WordPress. So I think the entire approach with Core specifically is to say, hey, we want to immediately enable anybody to do whatever they want. We want to figure out what makes most sense and what is most relevant for WordPress as a project. And then we want to help steer that project into whatever that future of the web, the future of WordPress's positioning here is. I think that a website will likely change over the next 5 years. And I think we want to be able to allow people to build and explore and experiment with what that change will be, and make sure that Core itself can enable that, as it's enabled democratizing publishing and digital expression for 20 years. We want to continue to allow that to happen, whatever that looks like, which will very likely not be a page with words on it as it has been for 20 years.
I do want you to lean in on that a little bit, because sometimes I think folks who are thinking about AI are thinking about it in terms of just like really basic, like prompting type usage stuff. But when you say that in 5 years, websites might not actually be websites, that in some ways is like the flagpole or the flag post that we're saying is like, this is why Core needs to have AI built in, is because things are changing very significantly and rapidly towards a different direction of so I don't want to take that for granted when you say websites might not be websites. So can you just pull that apart just a little bit in terms of what you think and what you're saying when you say that, James?
I think that the way people interact with AI, like how we see people chat with GPT instead of go to Google, things like that, that will become more predominant and prevalent.
Yeah.
And I can't make any predictions on where the web will be. And I think anybody who says in 5 years it's going to look exactly like this is lying, because you can't really tell where the technology will go, how people will adopt technology. ChatGPT was a weekend project by OpenAI, and it became what it is today. And it changed how people interact with software. So I think the core approach is to keep very close with where everything's going, understand where we can kind of get ahead with WordPress and do so, but also create the frameworks and the APIs and the functionality to allow WordPress to do what it's always done and explore through plugins and kind of move in the way that everybody needs it to move to be relevant. So I say that from the course perspective. I also say from my product building perspective at Automatic, we heavily expect to leverage these core things to go and build our products and kind of throw the dart at the board and say, this is where we think the web will go. And we can build using these things. And even if the web doesn't go this way, we still have these products built using these same unified systems that everybody else should hopefully be using as well. And it gives us the ability to pivot and be agile and nimble wherever the web brings us. So I don't really know where it will go, but I do know what we need to build to keep pace with where it will go, if that makes sense. And that's, I think, the best approach that anybody can have in software.
Yeah. So our audience for this podcast, right, is WordPress plugin and theme developers, most of whom already have a product out there. They're not necessarily people who are thinking about it, although we have a few of those. I think for some of them, this might seem very overwhelming or scary, right? Like even the thought of people don't go to websites anymore. They use ChatGPT. Imagine all those food bloggers that are probably losing a bunch of ad revenue right now and freaking out. Well, who sells to those? The plugin developers, the theme developers who are relying on, they make a lot of money, so they pay for my software. So now we're starting to see AI could be threatening to our businesses. So I'm curious from both of you, like, what do we think is the solution there in a way that we can leverage AI as product companies and also not be worried that it's going to reduce numbers of people who want to buy our products?
My answer is, I think so first off, Matt, you mentioned adding like these little prompting features and these little AI features. And I think that's the first step. Like the first step is you go from, I have a product and I've never been able to engineer out of the complexity of reporting, for example. And I know I can maybe solve that with AI and I can benefit my users immediately by doing so. So now with some of the CoreAI work and even before the CoreAI work, alleviating that problem makes your product better and makes people happier and use it. No matter where
So
AI
reducing
goes,
churn to a degree.
yes,
Is what
like
you're saying?
it's just a general product approach of how do I solve my customers' problems, and AI gives me another tool in that tool belt, because no matter where AI goes, tomorrow a website's not going to be any different than it is today. And your users will continue using your plugins, and your users and you, ideally, and you as a developer will pivot and change with where the industry goes and where people want their digital presence to go and how they expect to build it and how they expect to use plugins to extend it. And I'm taking like a plugin first approach here. So the first step is adding these little AI features, and ideally through the core work, the addition of these little AI features is kind of laying the foundation to add bigger things to your products, take bigger swings, and move a bit more quickly with wherever these industries go. I'll also note that I think that the web will be different in 5 years, but I'm also seeing like there are so many of these big proclamations that people will be doing XYZ, and it's much slower than that. Like there's a lot of sensational discussion around a lot of these topics, and it's not something where you just ignore it and you're like, this will never happen and the website of 2010 will be the website of 2050. But it is something where it's like, well, maybe these people are directionally correct and maybe I should be thinking in these ways, but my user's not one day going to decide that they don't want to accept donations on a site and accept donations through ChatGPT. Like that's not really possible. So how do I improve my products now? How do I keep track with what the WordPress core group is going, and also help steer the WordPress core AI group in the right direction, or at least like give opinions about where you think it will go, and kind of move with the flow with the river, because again, nobody knows exactly where it's going. We do know that things will change. We're doing our best in core to allow people to change with the industry. But it's a big question mark. So I'll end on.
What do you think, Jason? Yeah.
Yeah, great thoughts and great questions, and it's understandable why people feel a bit of apprehension towards the future when things change this shifty. The fear of the unknown kicks in, and it's easy to kind of fall into that. But at the same time, vinyl records are like selling like crazy right now. Like, who saw that coming?
Taylor
People
Swift.
have a way of holding on to things that they really like. Like, we don't necessarily always just drop something in favor of something new. People like to figure out ways to integrate the old with the new. And so I don't necessarily think it's going to be an extreme of shifting from one thing to the other. And a completely different perspective, thinking on like the audience here of developers and people building things, knowing how to develop and integrate with AI is not going to be a short-term skill. So even if you take the time to learn how to build that into a product now, and let's just say, unfortunately, for whatever reason, that product doesn't do as well, you still developed a highly valuable skill that is going to be a good skill to have for the long term right now. AI isn't, whether it replaces things or not, it's not going anywhere. And so it's still a good opportunity to view these as opportunities to just grow yourself as somebody who knows how to build these things and integrate with things like AI. So there's really no downside to taking the time to build those integrations.
Yeah. Did we lose Matt again? We might have lost Matt again.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We've been talking about this a lot internally for ourselves as well. You know, how can we work with this? How can we make it work with our product? I mean, I'll say as a smaller team here on this podcast episode, at least, like the biggest way that we've been leveraging AI right now is just to try and get more out of our dev work, and that kind of stuff has been pretty helpful. But I'm curious what you see. Can either of you say, like, timeline wise, what the timeline is for getting some of the stuff rolled out into Core? Do you know?
Yeah, I can give a estimate. So first, the answer to this is as soon as humanly possible. And to go a bit technical, the way we want to do this in CoreAI is to leverage Composer, canonical plugins, feature plugins to be able to create solutions that are immediately useful and also immediately official solutions that you can use to go and add AI and expose your features and use MCP, even before the discussion of a core merge happens. Because I also think AI is changing very rapidly, and some of this work should be available to developers in a central, unified way. But for example, MCP's protocol changes every single month. It's only existed for half a year. So should that be something that exists in Core when there are only 2-3 releases per year? No, I don't think so. Should it be something where it's an official WordPress project until it becomes stable and is available for the usage through Composer by multiple plugins with this unified, no conflict way? Probably yes. So that allows us to be very quick and nimble, but also give developers the building blocks to use in their own products where they know that this is the official WordPress way of doing things, and then eventually get to a point where some of this does go core. We're looking at the abilities API as something that could go core as soon as 6.9. I don't know. It's going to be an exploration. We're looking at a lot of this stuff being official as soon as it's ready and baked, like ready to go. Here it is. This is how you can use it now. Here's where we expect it to go with a pretty detailed roadmap. We want to push because we want to at least be in the position for future WordPress 7.0, 7.1, some of the future major versions to have the discussion of what do we want to bring core? What do we want to build feature-wise? Do we want to keep this in plugin territory? All questions, but all questions we can't ask unless we move really fast. So I think hopefully that gives some clarity of how we want to approach things. I think you'll be hearing the terms core adjacent and canonical plugins and composer packages a lot when it comes to AI by design.
Mm-hmm. So we had a really interesting comment here from Friendly Web Guy in the UK who said, could a site owner ask the built-in prompt to make a mini single-purpose plugin to solve a particular need, cutting out a traditional plugin dev? Which is a really interesting thing that I had not thought about, which is it possible that building, obviously what you're talking about is putting blocks into WordPress that make it available for plugins to build upon, but eventually you could see a point where it's more than that, and actually there's prompts built in WordPress core or some interface, right, for adding it and generating things. Do you see anything where this could potentially cut out plugin developers and make it easier for average site users to fix things, or like, you know, what do we call them? The power users?
I think it's a horrifying concept to say I'm going to prompt AI and it's going to install code onto my production WordPress site immediately, and I'm good to go. So I think that's my answer. Like, we
While
shouldn't be
possible,
doing
not a good idea.
Yeah, but so then if you think about the core, like how WordPress core works, it's one of these things where you can do whatever you want. And I guarantee you people will build things that create code and install it on a WordPress site. And this actually helps us talk about Lovable and Bolt. These are kind of how these things work too, where you go and get a prompt and you get code and it may do what you want it to do, but there's no support, there's no security. This thing might blow everything up. That's worrying. If you look at WordPress core, I don't think that would ever happen. I think WordPress core's job is to be this core framework, this core piece that other people can build these solutions onto. So I would assume that the AI features, if any, that end up in WordPress core are these basic quality of life things and things that allow developers to do more. So I would assume that there's the building blocks in WordPress core. There's some basic features, maybe some features surfacing through the command palette, maybe some features surfacing in the new site admin, but not something that's going to create an entire plugin and maintain it for you and have live support and do security audits and all of that. And that's why plugins exist now, because you can already do this, and you have been able to do this for a while. And my first business in WordPress plus AI was CodeWP, which made the plugins and made the snippets for people. And we saw that, like, in some situations, it would create a really lovely snippet and it would be great and it would solve everybody's time. It would fix the bug that you would be annoying people at Stellar about, that Stellar would say, hey, that's outside of our support scope, we can't do that. But it wouldn't create like this massive form solution that would solve every problem. And people prompted and people asked for it and they realized, hey, like, you can't do that. So I think that's, like, we won't see that in core. We definitely won't see that in core, but it's a question of
Yeah, I
will
like.
somebody build it and will somebody learn, like, maybe this isn't a good idea.
Yeah,
I
I
gotta
like
say,
James said code was already a commodity,
Yeah.
so it's not really something that we have to worry about in that same way. Go ahead, Matt.
I'm just Jason's heard this from me before, but like I'm a support guy. I'm like, those are all well and good intentions, but you know, you're going to build something and it's going to go a way that you don't expect. That's how, and then my team's going to hear about it one way or another. So,
And it's also
Yeah.
the solutions that Lovable and Bolt and things that just spit out code create are very brittle. They are not supported. Nobody knows how they work because you haven't put architectural thought into this. So you may have this brochure site, but what happens when you want to make a big update? What happens when you want to add forms to it? What happens when you want to do more than just mindlessly prompting for something? That's where things like WordPress, that's why plugins exist, and I think will be very relevant in the future. And will the plugin of today be the plugin of tomorrow? Likely not. There's likely going to have to be a pivot towards AI. There's likely going to have to be work within WordPress core to enable things like that. But there's always going to be, like, the need for support, the need for these really thoughtful solutions. And I'm absolutely seeing that with Lovable. People launch the sites, they're like, how do I fix it? How do I change it? Hey, why is my API key hard coded into the client side JavaScript? Like, there are all these things where this is why WordPress and our ecosystem does and can make sense into the future.
Nice.
Yeah. Jason, what are you guys looking ahead to with AI at Stellar and all of this? Is there anything you can share that's not totally top secret on this podcast episode that's only the three of us talking, really? So, you know, we won't tell anyone.
All right. I mean, I've already mentioned a couple. I think, honestly, right now, my mind is really still more on WordPress as a whole. Like, I want to narrow it in as we approach this. Like, in my opinion, one of the greatest strengths and greatest weaknesses of WordPress is its diversity of the ecosystem, right? Like, you can have 60, 100 plugins doing so many things. And that's a strength. But the weakness there is WordPress is in a constant tension of trying to figure out how the heck to unify that user experience. You go to different pages within the admin, they can look drastically different. Everybody's doing notifications their own way. There's all these attempts to try to unify this. And AI is a incredible way of doing exactly that. You have 100 plugins. If they are registering using the Abilities API and stuff like that, then through a single agentic interface or some other idea, I can now, as user, get comfortable with one thing that makes 100 things possible. And that is an extremely exciting possibility. And for me, part of how this can answer one of the greatest challenges in WordPress historically. And so that's really where my mind is at right now. And then I more just imagine how that would come to fruition within our specific products in Stellar. So like, you know, Stellar Sites, having that as just rolled into the hosting. You get your site, you already have it. GiveWP, making sure that it is leveraging the Abilities API and everything like that. And then experimenting and asking ourselves, how can we make it go further? Because there's kind of the stage one of having like a chat prompt to talk to, right? But then when you get truly agentic, it's where it starts to do specific and special things in given moments. So if it realizes, like a really simple example would be like if you ask it, hey, what's a donation plugin I can use? Well, then instead of just text responding to you within the agent of saying like you could use Give or you could use one of these, instead actually pulling from .org and being like, here are the cards for these. Do you want to just click a button and activate right now? Something like that. And so taking it steps beyond just a chat interface, but how can we really take it into like a real powerful agentic direction? So nothing really to share concrete other than a lot of interest and exploration.
Yeah. But that's honestly the reason why we really pushed hard for Jason to be at these meetings and to chat with James and things like that is specifically because there is a lot that's changing. The horizons are different than they used to be just 6 months ago. And there is a lot of potential, a lot of upside. And we want to make sure that we're paying attention and are helping to influence the future of this in one way or another. I don't want to get ahead to best advice, but like, we're doing what I think is the best advice. Be involved and pay attention, contribute, all those types of things. But I do want to move a little bit towards some of the tangible for our audience real quick.
Let me ask one question about that, because I said this earlier, and if people are familiar with me, then like our team is not huge, right? And I think we represent maybe what is a little bigger, even for some. Like some products are one developer building the thing, doing everything. Or like us, we've got an ops person, we have a couple on the dev side, marketing, right? So we're a little bit bigger, but still, even I struggle a lot with how do we keep up with all of the things that are happening in WordPress, and on this AI front, because that moves so much faster even than WordPress, that could impact our product. I'm going to be totally honest. Before I read the notes for this show, I had never heard of Lovable. No idea. I had no idea about all the GitHub conversations. How does a small plugin team keep up with all of this when we don't have someone who can just go hang out in WordPress, make WordPress Slack, or go monitor all the repos or like the fire hose channels, right? Like how do we do that as a small plugin team?
There was one thing that popped into my mind as you said I didn't know about Lovable, which is that you are not the minority here. Like many people don't know about this stuff. We do exist in a bubble, and it kind of goes back to the point of things will move slower than we all think they'll move, because everybody in AI is seeing things, but not everybody else is seeing things. And the adoption is going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And that is the opportunity of, if you are even anywhere near looking at AI, you're a bit further along than a lot of other people in terms of product, in terms of enhancing how you guys build your plugins. So that's one point. Second point is, I think the best way for the core AI stuff is everything that is super relevant and pressing. And this has happened in the WordPress project. And I know there are a lot of people who are interested in core AI who have not really been super plugged into the project itself and how the project operates, is published to the make.wordpress.org/AI blog. So
Yeah.
all the important stuff, WordPress specific, if there are any discussions that should be had, if there are any major decisions, new things coming out, go on to that blog. So
And
you
it has
can
a dedicated
you get the
RSS feed.
RSS. Yes. So read that, and that's
How
also like the
frequently are
gateway
posts
into everything
published
else.
on there?
Say it
The
again.
meetings are twice a month or every other week.
Okay.
So that's when they're
So
meeting.
it's talking about reading like 2 articles a month, maybe, and then you'd be on
Yeah, it's
top
not
of
going to be 100
it-ish.
articles a month. It's going to be
Okay, that's what
hey,
I'm asking.
here's what we're chatting about. Here are the big things that we're releasing and what we're expecting to do, and here are direct links to watch and contribute and discuss. And that's the whole. This is super important to the CoreAI group, because if there's no discussion, we could maybe build the perfect solution, but we would very likely build a solution that wouldn't take into account everything that should be accounted for when you think about WordPress core.
Yeah.
So that's the block. That's the one link that I give everybody. And there's more out there. There's the CoreAI Slack channel. There are the bi-weekly synchronous meetings. There are the GitHub repos. But you'll find all of that in these posts. And then you'll be able to decide how involved you want to be and how vocal you want to be and where you want to point your time. But everything is in that blog. Look at the blog.
But I will say that like most of what you all are deciding to do is because of a lot of context that you already have when you come into those meetings in the first place. So some of the things that Amber is highlighting is like, what is the context behind the context? Like you all made those decisions because of the information you already have. I will say I've seen James in the CoreAI channel already being like, hey, this channel shouldn't only be populated by our meetings. Like everybody talk about the AI stuff that you're working on regularly. What's the AI news going on in here? And I've noticed that there's activity in there outside of meetings that I find really valuable myself. But some of it is also just simply paying attention to the space. Amber, it's a really great question, and sometimes I think normal product owners who are buried in their own work, that they're like, this is how I make money. I don't make money by reading somebody else's blog post. But at the same time, it's kind of like, it's the context of the space that we all live and exist in. And there is this part, you know, I'm at this stage, like 10 years removed from being on a 4-person team, you know what I mean? But at that time, still, I spent a ton of time just reading and investing and looking around at the whole space. It's really hard to feel like that's valuable time when you know that there's like 200 support tickets waiting for you behind the other side. But I do still, in retrospect, find that time an investment in your future overall. It's hard to feel like it when you're doing it. So
another angle on this is like the approach to AI, right? So for a small team right now, with things moving so quickly and like MCP and stuff, it's very technical. And so to build the technical expertise necessary to keep up with this is hard. You're not wrong with that, Amber. And so part of the goal, a significant part of the goal of the CoreAI team, is to lower the bar, is to make these things much more approachable so you don't have to understand it. Like something that that kind of blows my mind when I think about it is like, it will be easier to integrate with the Abilities API than to add a block to Gutenberg. Like, to say, I have this feature.
Not sure that's a credit for Gutenberg.
Is that a high bar or a low bar? I'm not sure.
Well, really, all you have to say is, I have this feature. I'm making a tool. It does this thing, describe it in plain English, and then do some function call to do a thing that you would normally be doing inside your plugin or theme anyway. And so part of this is to give people the ability to get a lot of value out of the AI space without having to be an expert in the AI space. So you still be good at what you do, know how your plugin is amazing and all of that good stuff, learn the abilities API, which is really not a hard API to learn. And then, albeit it's still being defined, but as it is now, it's not difficult to understand. You learn it, you integrate with it, boom, you are now taking advantage of AI. Like
Yeah,
that
and
is
now
part
any
of the
AI
goal of
in
this.
WordPress and MCP can use what you've exposed here. And I'll
Yeah.
also mention that these APIs, and we are being very mindful about this, and we have explicitly said this, these are the first APIs for WordPress, and the first APIs that will be available at software that has the scale of WordPress that were designed post AI. So we're creating these to be easy to use with AI and develop into your product using AI to help you in terms of how they're designed and how they're documented. So ideally, it will be even easier than Jason just said, because you can take your code base and you can say, here's the document that this team wrote specifically to allow AI to at least give me a V001 of this implementation. Go explain how to do it. Help me out. And all of these APIs are designed like that, mindfully. And I think that's a really cool opportunity, because everything else I was mentioning before the show, Gutenberg is actually really good for AI, but it was designed before AI. And like, what decisions would have been made if it came about 10 years later? I don't know.
Yeah.
But we have those decisions, and we can make those decisions now with the AI work. And ideally, it can help alleviate some of the complexity that may come with it and may not.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I do appreciate that there is thought put into that, because there are a lot of really amazing plugins out there developed by people that with small teams, or who are not, maybe like they're really great at PHP but not JavaScript or something like that, and that doesn't mean their plugin isn't fabulous. And so I love that you all are putting some thought into like, how can we make this easy for people to level up into it?
Yeah. I want to get back to the whole premise. So, future of WordPress. We've done a lot of context here. A lot of context, a lot of like what we're doing today in terms of moving forward. Future of WordPress terms. What is it exactly that the work that you're groundbreaking on right now, James, is going to unlock for WordPress as a whole? Let's just say as a whole, but with an eye towards plugins. That's going to allow it to not just look at what's happening with, like, Figma is doing interesting things, like Webflow is doing interesting things. Of course, there's Lovable and Bolt and Vue, all of these things. Instead of just being like, yeah, we do that too. What is it that we're doing today that's going to look at that and be like, no, 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 we are eons ahead. We're not old news. We are the news. We are the ahead of the game. What's happening there?
I think it unlocks that type of thinking. So all of this work that we're doing, all of the future work that's coming in core in terms of site admin redesign work, in terms of the collaborative editing work, when all of these pieces exist on the same board, you have a piece of software that is infinitely extensible, which we've seen over the past 20 years with all these plugins. You have a piece of software that has a very defined way to create front ends, and you eventually have a piece of software with a very defined and modern way to create admin sides of things. You have defined databases. You have software that's been documented for 20 years that AI already knows about. So you now have this one-stop shop to go and create any digital experience you want on the web, which could be a website, but it could be a micro application. It could be an entire application. And there's no other ecosystem that has that out of the box. If you go to V0 and you prompt for something, you get a front end. But how do you go and connect it to a database? Previously, that was a big question mark, and there was no answer. Now there is an answer, and it's like, go to Supabase and set up Supabase and figure out what Supabase is and what Postgres is. Like, what is any of this? And that's the case for all of these systems, including Figma, including everything. There's no one-stop shop to go and do end-to-end creation, and do it in a way where, and Jason brought this point up, and I love this point, do it in a way where anybody can do anything they want. So you can have an enterprise application, you can have a website, you can have an e-commerce store, you can have all of this, which we already have in WordPress. But I think AI plus the additions of The core AI work plus the future stuff that's already been planned and roadmapped for years, that's what positions WordPress in this unique way. And I don't think it's like, oh, WordPress will be the only thing in the future. But I
Yeah.
do think WordPress has a very, very strong position in the future if we're able to build in this direction and also like create plugins that leverage this type of stuff, create tools that allow people to build in this way. Just think towards the future. But I think we're moving in the right direction. I always want to be moving faster, but I think we are moving very fast for the pace of WordPress as well already. And that's where we can end up, where this thing is something that, like you said, doesn't just exist and isn't like that 20-year-old thing, but is now an integral cornerstone piece of the open internet in an AI first era. Which in that it may be the only thing, because everybody's trending towards these closed platforms, walled gardens, no open source, no data ownership. So if we can remain relevant, we will have the most important position on the web, in my opinion, which really for 20 years. So that's another probably product talk, 5 more episodes.
Yeah.
Of talking about that.
Yeah.
That's a bold take.
Yeah. So Ian had asked a little bit ago, are there any examples, really cool examples that are already leveraging kind of like the pre-beta, whatever we're calling this version of this? Do you know of any, either of you?
I know of
Someone
some that
wanted
will
to
go
go
public
look
soon.
at one.
I know some that will go public soon, but they're not out yet, so I'll let them go out. I know, and this is my fault for not having the name, but the PHP client API built by Felix Arntz, that is heavily inspired by another plugin that he's created called AI Services. And AI Services is on the repository, and it does something very similar to what we want this underlying API to do. And it does it in a different way that doesn't make sense for core, but it's been built in the most incredibly architected way possible. If you look at the code, it's beautiful. And there's a service or another plugin that uses AI services in the way that we kind of expect all of this to come together. They're using AI services to speak with these LLMs, and they're exposing specific functionalities and features there. And I'm forgetting the name, and I hate that I'm forgetting the name. But I love that example because it's a great example of using these infrastructural pieces to go and build stuff. The abilities API that we've been mentioning is modeled off of and essentially Automattic will donate the features API, do heavy work to make it WordPress core ready. And it will be the abilities API. Right now, the existing features API package has a demonstration agent in it. So it was actually built in a very, this isn't a word, but a very unpretty way. So the user interface is bad by design because we want you to look at the code and be like, hey, here's how these guys are using these features and interacting with LLMs to go and allow functionality to happen. And I can say within Automattic, all of these concepts have been concepts since I joined. And all of our products are biasing towards using these upcoming core APIs. And really good example is the AI website builder on WordPress.com. We have WooCommerce work in the future that will use the same stuff, and a lot of other projects that are using this as well. So long answer short, no direct product just yet because it's so new. Maybe there is, and I'm kind of missing out. There are a lot of explorations into AI. There's a lot of usage of like the explorations of the explorations I've seen. Also shout out Classify from 10up/Fueled, coming from Jeff Paul's group. And I named Jeff Paul by name because he's on the CoreAI team. For examples, and there's a lot of like, here's what can happen, but nothing there just yet. I'll close by saying we expect to build a showcase plugin as the CoreAI team to show you how these 3 things come together and serve as a reference and an experimental base to play around with some of these features and showcase how all of these systems work together.
Yeah. Jason, I'd love to hear a little bit of your take on the question about just like, is the work we're doing right now with CoreAI, is this really going to give us that leapfrog effect with WordPress where we're going to be able to really say clearly, like, we're doing the thing that takes us into the future? I mean, one little tiny bit of additional content that needs to be elephant in the room said, there's a lot of devs in the world who think WordPress is half dead because of its code base. It's an old, dying platform. That's like, none of us think that, right? Wink, wink. But that is a perception that folks have. Is this something that we're doing that's going to be able to be like, oh, no, WordPress is the new sexy?
It's a good question. And people have said that about PHP as a language too, and yet here it is still powering over 80% of the web. Like, clearly public perception of things and the reality of the market are two very, very vastly different things. But yeah, as I said before, and I'll reiterate again, because I think it's, to me, one of the most profound opportunities of WordPress is overcoming that weakness that you can do so many things in WordPress, but for every feature you add via a plugin, you generally increase the complexity of the experience. So it's this, like, you could probably chart it in a way. For every plugin I add, my user experience complexity goes up. My power also goes up. But these two things travel next to each other in a rather unfortunate way. And having a unified way for WordPress to scale in terms of capability, but remain stable in terms of user experience is a really incredible opportunity. Is basically what we can do as WordPress is we can introduce something agentic like this and then scale to the level of plugins and capabilities we have in the ecosystem faster than anybody. So you get Give, WooCommerce, the events calendar, all of these folks adding support for this. And not only did we just introduce AI, but we introduced AI with a level of capability that nobody can compete with. And we did it so quickly. That is a unbelievable advantage if everybody is able and willing to get behind that.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. That's good stuff. Are we really at the stage in which we're like, how close is it that we're going to be like, all right, I just spun up a new WordPress website. Let's like ignore the 5-minute install setup thing. I just installed a new WordPress website. I'm going to build an enterprise app that jumps into a new area that I need to do for my business. How close are we to that vision?
I'm gonna be honest. I'm not sure I understood the vision.
Right?
Well, part of leaning in on what James was saying earlier, that's the reality that we're moving towards. Is that this work that we're doing now is going to enable WordPress to basically be able to build any type of digital experience that we want, right?
So
if that's where we're moving towards, and if this is the work that we're doing now that's going to enable that in the future, how long is that future?
So I want to say something real quick. It is entirely possible to build a complex web application with WordPress right now without AI, because we have done it when we were doing our enterprise builds. Like, we weren't building websites most of the time. We were building portals or web apps that were not public facing. So that is 100% possible right now. What I think is that it will get easier for people who don't have that enterprise developer level expertise to maybe do that, I think. But that's already possible. It's just hard and takes a lot more time. Whereas the way I see what's happening with the future of WordPress is that kind of stuff will get easier and go a lot faster.
Yeah, like, I love WordPress's tagline, democratizing publishing. Are we going to be democratizing all the things? Like, are we going to be democratizing all the digital applications?
Well, I like the term democratize digital, because I think it's kind of the evolution of what everything becomes. And I think, to answer the question, so what Jason said in terms of, you can do so much with WordPress, but the more you kind of layer onto WordPress core, the more complex it gets. That's something that already is and will continue to be enhanced with AI. Not enhanced in terms of it gets more complex, but enhanced of I can now bring all of these solutions together, and I can kind of like pick and choose the pieces. I know my problem. I know maybe I'm a developer and I know even how to solve the problem. Maybe I'm not, and I'm an expert in what I do. And I know I can assemble these things on WordPress. And now this AI can help me in terms of that assembly, in terms of choosing the right bits, in terms of understanding why things may blow up when I install one thing. And that makes WordPress a lot more powerful and unlocks the power that it already has. Then there's also the other side of things where you now have these AI platforms and systems like Automatic's AI website builder, like Elementor's AI, like all of these Cadence AI, all of these things are unlocking some of that power for a more general consumer. And I could also see a lot of that kind of tying plugins and themes and the front end and the back end all together in a way that wasn't even possible unless you hired like a massive enterprise agency and spent 5 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars on. So that's kind of the vision. And I think, like, I know within Automatic, we've been thinking about some of these things and experimenting around, can I generate a block and generate a backend and like create a web app through a lovable style interface? And the answer is yes. And we need more time and we have to put more effort into this product, but this will probably be something that we release. And I know many other companies doing the same thing, and we're all doing it in a bit of a different way, but we're all using the same pieces of WordPress to pull it together. And that's even removed from AI. We're all using, or many of us are using the block editor. Many of us are using plugins to create admin pages that look a bit dated, but that's being fixed with future versions of WordPress. So we're all doing the same stuff. And then when you layer in the AI and you're like, hey, go and add these abilities, go and connect to these LLMs in this unified way, you have a pretty end-to-end system. And now you have many different ways to get to that end-to-end system, all oriented at either general market or specific areas of that market. And that becomes really exciting.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. I think, it's interesting. There's been lots of conversations over the past year about the market share of WordPress and where it's going. And I know, Matt, you raised earlier, like, how does this help WordPress better compete with, some of the other builders that are doing more with that? And one of the things that I think that's interesting from a product developer perspective is if you look at the history of WordPress, a huge reason why WordPress was able to grow to the market share it was is because of the plugin developers. And so if we are following that same kind of trajectory, Core needs to have this capability, but in order for it to really continue to make WordPress appealing, is the plugin developers have to bring it into their products, and then they have to market that it's in their products, because that is what's going to tell consumers that they can do this with WordPress. Because if Core just has the capabilities, but none of the plugins that people use leverage it, then it doesn't matter that Core has the capabilities. And so really, if we're thinking about how do we keep WordPress relevant for people as product owners, we need to be figuring out how to keep our products relevant and on the edge, because that's what's going to make the entire platform stay relevant.
Yep. We have this comment here from Peter Ingersoll. Making Core more robust and available for other AI tools to code for feels to me a better way to go versus putting it all into WP itself. We shall see. And that's the balance. This audience right here, the thing that they don't want, James, is that you all build something that's so great with AI that plugins aren't needed anymore, which in some ways there's this careful balance between the fact that like plugins do extend WordPress in such incredible ways and they're so necessary. I love Matt Mullenweg asked in, I think it was WordCamp, like 19 or so, he was like, how many of you have a WordPress website that has 0 plugins? And there's not a single hand in the room. Nobody has a WordPress website with 0 plugins. Plugins are what make
everybody
WordPress
has Hello Dolly.
powerful. Yeah, at minimum. But at the same time, is that, like Jason's point, is that the best user experience? That we're nickel and diming our folks into all these millions of different plugins that they need to use to build out the site that they want. Or even honestly, a lot of folks will lean on something like a functionality plugin or like a snippets plugin to insert a whole bunch of tiny little snippets. I do that on the WP Product Talk site, for example. each one of those snippets is loading something and taking time as well. They might as well be like micro plugins. There's a world in which AI is going to empower folks to create all of those little tiny little functionalities, but then at the same time, it's just creating a whole bunch of tiny little plugins as well to enhance the complexity of the website, right? So there's this careful balance between how it can empower folks to have a much better user experience, to not require so many functionality plugins. Let's say like platform plugins is a term that some folks use for like WooCommerce or Give or the events calendar, things like that. Functionality plugins are kind of like things that AI should be able to do today in many ways. But it's this careful balance. So I don't really have a question here. I'm just kind of.
Well, I have an agreement to your it's a careful balance. I think it really is. I also think that you need to, when you think about core specifically, you need to think about how big WordPress really is. And like, I know everybody says 43% of the web. I never really got it until I started working at Automatic. This is a massive project, and this is a project that powers so many. It powers NASA. It powers my personal blog. It powers humongous D2C websites that do hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So it's this super versatile thing. So I don't think we could ever expect this massive AI thing to just be, now it's in core and it's added so much overhead and so much excess to WordPress, because that's not how WordPress works. And you bring up the point of plugins. Plugins are the reason why core works. It's the reason why WordPress is still relevant after 20 years. If it was WordPress core and no plugins, WordPress wouldn't exist. So it's the ecosystem around WordPress. It's how can you enable the ecosystem to do things in the same way that contribute to the overall user experience. And how can you kind of enable that while smoothing out maybe some of the really, really basic, really annoying things in WordPress core with AI, or maybe even without AI. I like the point about like using AI to enhance WordPress. I think that's an interesting approach. I can see a lot of basic functionality plugins being enhanced, improved, or created. Again, like we opened, I don't really see the events calendar being prompted through 3 prompts and powering the massive website. I don't think that's ever going to happen. And I think even if it did happen, you won't have the people and the support around it. You won't have the marketing. You won't have the learning. You won't have the webinars, which is probably always going to have a place in the industry. So I agree with you. That's a long agreement, but I agree with you.
Yeah, this has been a fabulous conversation. In fact, we've gone way longer than we normally do, which because it's so great. And I appreciate we're still getting comments and questions in the YouTube chat, which unfortunately, I don't know if we're going to have time to address them all. But I do think it would be good for us to transition to what is our best advice, which for everybody watching, and this is like our little elevator pitch of what we think product owners who want to get into AI or start putting that in their plugin, what is our best advice for them?
And all of y'all that are in the comments right now, right after best advice, I'm going to do the whole like giveaway thing. So hang on tight. All right. So actually best advice, I'm up first.
Who's up first?
Yeah, I think I'm up first. So best advice is stick to the end of the show. That's my first best advice. Second best advice is start showing up on those biweekly meetings. That's exactly what we asked Jason and team to do. That's what they've been doing. Jason's been bringing value to those conversations, and he's been bringing that right back to the Stellar team automatically. Am I stealing your best advice, Jason? I hope I'm not. But like that's what I think is best, is show up to those meetings, and even just be like a wallflower, just listen and see how it goes, or like volunteer if you can, if there's things to do. So it's been super valuable for me. I've been reading all the stuff, reading the summaries later, and definitely benefiting from what Jason has been bringing back to Stellar. It's been already a big advantage for me. So that's my best advice. And James, we have you up next.
Oh, you kind of stole some of my advice too. So
yeah, your team. You're like, show up to my thing, guys. Yeah.
I have two bits, and this is all like actually pretty consistent throughout if we're speaking with product developers or agencies or any of it. The first is get involved, and get involved right now, because right now is a very formative part of AI in WordPress. Formative in terms of what we're building, what we're thinking, how what we're building is architected, and if it like makes sense for you as a developer of an existing plugin, or if you have this crazy idea, is it possible now because of AI? These are the questions that we want to be getting and answering and exploring with everybody. So Jason's been doing that. Jason's brought up points in terms of designing this PHP client API that weren't necessarily top of mind until he showed up. And then it was like, hey, like, this is a very relevant point to Stellar, but also to many other web hosts. We should think about this. We should design for this. Let's go and have this discussion in GitHub. All of those things wouldn't happen if he wasn't involved. So we need more involvement like that. The second bit is to design the future that you want with AI, because it's very scary. It is. And things are changing a lot. And the best thing to do is be proactive and say, I want this. Like, I want WordPress to be in this spot in the future. I want, in general, it to be this end-to-end means of building applications, or I want my plugin to have XYZ features. You have to just move in that direction. You have to get involved in these conversations. You have to see what's being shaped by Core to understand, hey, is this going to be able to be this new product feature of mine? You need to get involved in Core in general to say, I think WordPress should be here in the future. Like, what are we doing to bring it here? And if the answer is we're not, like, why are we not? Should we not be? Should we be? Those types of discussions help design the future of where everything goes. And that's the beauty of open source. It's what people want. And it wouldn't exist if people didn't want it. So design the future you want, whatever that means to you. And to me, I think like the main way to design the future you want is to get involved in the CoreAI stuff. Shout out again, make.wordpress.org/AI and the CoreAI channel in Slack.
Excellent. Love it. Amber.
All right. So I'm not going to repeat, go read the blog post, but of course I suppose you should. But what I would say is actually, it doesn't matter what size your team is. There is always more things that you could build than there is time in a week or a month or a year. And so what I would say to be a little bit cautious about with the AI stuff is shiny object syndrome. So pay attention to what your customers actually will benefit from. Think really long and hard on that, what they will be willing to pay for, because what they want is not always the same as what they'd be willing to pay for. And then also how you will support it, because we can definitely get into areas with AI being able to speed up our ability to code certain things or whatever, where potentially we could build out a feature and then it would have taken a bunch of our time and attention, but in the long run, it doesn't benefit the product business. So I would really spend time thinking kind of consciously about that and mapping out and making sure, if you don't have one, that you have some sort of clear roadmap and how AI can fit into that in support of other things that maybe you already have the research to show are necessary for your product.
Love it.
What about you, Jason?
Yeah, I'll echo the get involved, right? It's definitely a good time to do it. And I will say that I showed up completely out of nowhere last Thursday. And just started asking questions, jumping into conversations, and everybody was extremely friendly, inviting. Nobody has told me that, get back over there, nerd. They've been really friendly about it. So it probably feels scary to approach a team like that, but they're great people. Like, they definitely want to hear your thoughts and input, and nobody's gonna look down on you if you don't know AI deeply and all that good stuff. So just go for it. Then for product owners and the like, don't get overly distracted by possibilities. Just start somewhere. Like, at this point, we are developing a skill of thinking in these ways of what AI can do and how to integrate it into products or what products to build around it. Like, it's better to just start doing something than to get stuck in analysis paralysis with all of this stuff. So just do something. And then second is think beyond the agent. Apple has taken a really interesting approach to AI, where they've said that their goal is not to come out with another agent. A lot of us, when we think of AI, we think of LLMs, we think of ChatGPT and Gemini, we think of these chat interfaces that we work with. But there's a heck of a lot more that you can do with AI that has nothing to do with the chat interface. So don't limit yourself to just thinking about how can I make it, my product work inside of a chat interface.
Yeah.
There are so many other creative ways to approach AI where the user doesn't even realize that they're using AI.
Mhm.
Your product just feels like magic because it just did something incredible, and you know that an agent or that a LLM or whatever somewhere did that for you. Um, but yeah, so be creative with all of this stuff.
Yep. Excellent. Love it. All right, we're going to get to the giveaway. I just want to highlight super fast mode. A couple really great comments in this. We did that one. Marshall, real quick, how do you see AI as future security assistant for WP sites integrated with Core or somehow? We're not going to get to it. I think it's really great though.
Shout
Security.
out PatchStack though. Shout out to PatchStack. They did a
Patch Stack,
lovely AI thing. Look at their work. It's awesome.
I
And it's very
appreciate that, James. That's a good one. Yeah, PatchStack's AI implementation is really, really excellent. They're a great one. It's not core, but it's really great. I love this one. Rising Tides from Ian Meisner. He says, Rising Tides, I'm okay if a site needs 12 plugins instead of 35 subtext because of AI. I think I agree with that. Depends on the plugins you're getting rid of, I have to say. Peter Ingersoll says, it's become faster for me to use AI to create a snippet that I bring into WP to do the exact thing I want versus finding a plugin that might do the part. It's exactly what I do. If you want to see WP or AI in action, look at the WP Product Talk website.
There's actually a bunch of videos on the Equalize Digital YouTube channel where I show the back end of that website and how it's all built because I've been modifying. So the caveat I will say is AI code snippets are not always accessible.
Yeah. They all.
I have gone through and fixed a lot of those code snippets.
I just always say, now make it secure and accessible, AI, please. And it works. And I hope AI can improve. This is Peter Ingersoll again. I hope AI can improve the overall WP experience beyond code. For example, cleaning and enhancing the WP repositories, presenting 59,000 plugins and 13,000 themes is not really helpful. Might agree to disagree on that one a little bit. But there's definitely still always room for pruning when it comes to things that are outdated or insecure.
Better search.
Yeah, or better. Yeah, I miss the
Well, I
days
like
of.
the term enhancing. I like the term enhancing. I like that a lot. And Matt Mullenweg explicitly was speaking about that at WordCamp Europe. So if you want to see change there, there is a team that you can get involved with as well. And I'm sure they would love your help.
Last one, we're definitely not going to get into. Ian Meisner says, how involved is the Woo team? I'd love to see a lot more AI activity from the Woo team myself. I think that's a good idea.
I'm sure it's coming.
We'll hope to hear from them.
That's what I have to say.
Point. Yeah.
Having no insider information, I'm just sure it's coming.
Yeah, for sure. So cool. Everybody, here is the thing. If you are looking for some free swag, and James and Jason, I will set you up myself. But this is where you go. Go to wpproducttalk.com and go to the contact page, because right now, for a limited time, you will see. Can you see the drop down on this? Does it show up on the screen?
Yep.
I want a WPPT hat. When you go to the contact form, choose the option, I want a WPPT hat, and then tell me your size and your mailing address, and I'm going to send it to you. So open for like 24 hours from now. And thank you all so much for being our listeners and for being the reason why we do this at all. And I cannot believe that we've done 100 episodes, and I hope I'm alive by the time we do 200.
Yes, me too. James, Jason, do you want to share where people can find you online?
Yeah, James W. LePage on X, formerly known as Twitter. That is where I talk a lot about AI and WordPress.
Jason the Adams on X. You can also find me on the post status Slack, and then also in the WordPress Slack as well. So feel free to grab me in any of those spaces.
Love it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for being here. Thank you to everyone who watched. I think we're up to like 138 viewers. So Thanks so much for watching live. If you are watching this next week, our co-hosts Zach Katz and Katie Keith will be back with guest Steve Jones, one of my partners from Equalize Digital, to discuss translation and expanding your product's reach to an international audience.
Special thanks, like always, to Post Status for being our green room. And if you're enjoying these shows, do us a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, wherever you are listening to us at. Share it with your friends. Reference this show in your newsletters. We got a reference in a newsletter just today, actually. And most of all, we hope to see you for a brand new episode of WP Product Talk next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.